Thanks for joining us, James McVey of the Vamps, most famously lead guitarist of the Vamps for the past 12 years.
Yep.
And this year had your second solo album out.
Yes, I have.
Letters Home.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks for having me, mate. We've obviously been speaking for a while, so it's nice to kind of get on here and have a proper talk.
I think we've talked on social media for a few years. Actually, we've kind of followed each other since the early Crown and Caliber days for me. And now we actually get to see face to face, talk to each other. It's great to chit chat a little bit about life and watches.
It's funny, isn't it, how watches like bring people together, and even the fact that we speak on social media. There's like several people I've been speaking to for years on social media. It's all through watches, but I've never, as you say, this is the first time we've physically seen each other speaking. It's just amazing how a little thing on your wrist can bring people together from across continents. And so thanks for having me, man.
Thanks. We know you've also been part of we have you in the Watch Society WhatsApp group, so it's nice to have you talking in there, and you've brought some friends along there too, so we appreciate that.
not at all, man. Well, thank you for inviting me to that, because I think for me, I was saying this on a podcast actually the other day, a big a podcast in the like Asian watch scene, and I was saying that a real like mark of me feeling like I've successfully infiltrated the watch community was being invited to your WhatsApp group, and since yours I've been invited to one more as well, and I'm like, finally. I've been collecting watches for maybe 8 years now. And at the start, I felt a little bit of a sort of kickback from maybe some people in the community being like, who is this guy? Does he really like watches? Oh, he's got a Rolex Submariner. He clearly doesn't like watches. But now I'm in the WhatsApp groups. I'm hoping people will eventually, let me in.
I mean, in fairness, the Rolex Submariner is one of those watches that's so ubiquitous within and without the watch community that it's like, do they like watches or not when you see that? So it's an interesting one.
You know what the thing with the sub though is I've now got it on like a commando strap, so people will hopefully think he really likes watches.
Yeah, when you start changing straps, especially on a Rolex, then you really like watches, because even watch people don't usually change the Rolex bracelet because it's so comfortable. It really is. Probably the best.
You know what? It's more comfortable than an Oyster bracelet. It's having an arm still, and I think having an Oyster bracelet in London is a recipe for having it chopped off. So there's several reasons to why I'm on the commando strap.
So let's start off with what do you have on your wrist today?
So I have a Vertex MP45 Artic, and it's on this under the cuff kind of rubber strap, which is really cool. And so Vertex are one of the reason I'm wearing this actually is so I thought it'd be funny to talk about how I kind of got into watches, and I've not really spoken about this watch for a while, and I have like a real memory of, so when I first got into watches, it was through my father-in-law, and he had been hounding me for years about watches, various different companies. He's a big fan of Christopher Ward, so he was saying from the off, like, oh, you should check out this brand. They're based just up the road from you. Like, you should get into it. And I was like, well, I don't really need a watch. Blah blah blah. I'd never been fussed. And then I eventually got into watches in a big way, but still, I got into watches, but then wasn't really sure about how they work, what they mean. So when I got this watch, mainly for the fact that I just loved kind of how legible and clear it was. I didn't know anything about chronographs. And I remember saying to Steve, my father-in-law, I was like, I love it, but yeah, the second hand's not moving. And he was like, no, the second hand is moving in that smaller subdial. And I was like, yeah, but I want the big second hand to move around all the time. And he's like, well, you don't really want the chronograph running the whole time. And I was like, no, like, absolutely. And it's funny, I was thinking about this today because, like, in hindsight, he must have thought, God, this guy is moronic. Like, what? You don't want to have your chronograph, running permanently all the time. That is just not a good idea. But he didn't want to, like, sort of extinguish the small flame that was building in me of being into watches, so he didn't say anything about it. And then now I realize how crazy stupid I must have sounded.
Well, here's the thing though, is you get more and more into watches, there are watches that are meant for the chronograph to run all the time.
Yeah, not
if you
this
have a
one.
vertical clutch column. Yeah. It's a higher end watches. The vertical clutch chronographs are always running in the background.
Wow.
So when you turn it on, it just connects the two together and continues the run. So if you have a vertical clutch, which, we're talking Daytonas and Vacherons, and some Omegas even actually, they exist, but they don't exist in the less expensive realm.
Yeah,
because it is a more challenging thing. But I know there are people who purposely like those because they can just have them running all the time and it doesn't hurt the watch.
That is cool. I just think I didn't even understand the complication. So I was just like, oh well,
Everything
it looks weird. Yeah. I just It was just funny. I had no idea. So that's what I've got on my wrist, and I realize. And what I love about watches is, I think I spoke in the WhatsApp group a while ago, and I said, does anyone else go through these periods of just really feeling, I don't know, just sort of like a bit turned off by watches? And I don't know why. I'm trying to remember what was going on in the industry at the time, but I just felt like, it's the first time since starting collecting where I kind of lost a little bit of inspiration. And what I realized is, I was like, well, okay, let's think, what am I actually excited or inspired by in watches now? What is it? Because, in the early years, I kind of, probably like everyone else that gets into watches, fell into the whole diver world, and you do Rolex, you do Tudor, and then whatever, like a bit of Omega. And then I sort of realized that I'd lost that kind of buzz, that real energy and excitement I had around watches. And I looked back through my collection, and I picked this Vertex up out of the safe, and it was on I think it was actually on the bracelet. So Don, who is like top Vertex man, he brought out like a really cool but quite chunky bracelet for this watch, and it was just sat on that, and I was like, I don't know. And I find it insane how you can just swap out, take a bracelet off, put some like NATO or rubber, which is brilliant for on stage wear and stuff. Yeah, exactly.
But this is a Moser on a Christmas strap.
Yes, I knew it was a Moser. I was going to get onto that in a minute, but that's exactly what I mean. Like, and it really feels like you're having a brand new watch. And I think for me, yeah, I just got to a point where I was like, okay, let's mix things up, let's change it, and see if that has a. I was like, maybe actually I'm just through with the hobby. Maybe I need to start collecting trains or something. But no, thank God. Just it's funny how putting rubber onto this Vertex made me think like, oh, actually, I really, really like this watch. Okay, no, I am excited. I'm blah blah blah. Let's go. And then the sub was put on a NATO, and just everything started changing again. So that's why, yeah, this watch in particular, it was an interesting one to talk about, because just a little shift like that has completely kickstarted the love again.
Absolutely a very common experience. So let's reverse to where we're talking about, which is, my first question is, what first got you into watches? And it seems that your father-in-law did.
Yes. So yeah, Steve has been into watches for, I don't know, probably 20 or 25 years. And it started for him, I think, because he used to travel a lot for work, and it was, a time when you could walk in and pick up, a Rolex, well, kind of whatever Rolex you want. And it would be, I don't know, 1,500 quid or something. And so so by the time I met his daughter 10 years ago, he was, 15, 20 years deep in his collecting. And as I'm now experiencing with every person I tend to meet, it's an infectious hobby that you try and pass off to people around you, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I was fresh meat for him to try and convert. And I was very fortunate definitely when I met my wife that I'd enjoyed quite a good deal of success in the sort of couple years around that time, and I had some spare cash, and I was sort of early 20s. I'd really been fortunate to buy my first property, so I had like a little bit of just cash that I didn't really know what to do, and so I was almost like the perfect project for him to try and convert. And he would, he'd be like, "Oh, Tudor's just brought out this watch called the Black Bay 58. I think we should both get one of these." And I'd be like, "Well, I wasn't really."
Every time you go over for dinner, he's just like bringing out the watches.
Yeah. It was honestly like that. I always find it's like people I ask is once you've got 3 watches, and that doesn't mean 3 very expensive watches. I just think three watches that are diverse, across the board. So once you start breaking away from just say a stereotypical diver or a stereotypical dress watch, when you get that variety, it really turns into something where you're like, oh God, I've got a problem, because the parameters of your interest are just growing and growing and growing. So I think for me, it would have been around that kind of 7-year ago mark where I'd got the Submariner. Submariner was my first watch, which I'm not embarrassed to say, actually. Because,
no, it's a great watch. I mean, never be embarrassed by that.
Yeah, and I think, name a watch that has had more influence in the watch world. I don't think you can from a design perspective, really.
It would there are very few who started off whole categories. The Calatrava for dress watches, the Submariner for dive watches, that kind of thing. The, I guess, IWCs for pilot watches. There are very few things that that's the standard that started it all. And the Submariner is it for the dive watches. You can have an argument who was first or whatever. Everyone copies the Submariner.
Yeah, for sure. So once I'd had that, and then this Vertex, that even that going from having black dial dive watch to then having a white chronometer, chronograph, sorry. It was that in itself, I was like, okay, my interest was like almost doubled from just being like, oh, I'm into dive watches. Oh, so now there's this other category. So then when I got the third, which I think probably was that Black Bay 58, I mean, obviously it's a dive watch, but it just kind of, well, sort of in that category, it inspired paying homage to vintage Submariner vibes, right? So I was already then thinking, oh, okay, well, that kind of photinery vibe that my Black Bay 58 has, I was like, oh, well, that makes me think, oh, well, what about real vintage? And then, it just carries on. And so I would say the third watch is when things changed.
That was actually my next question. Is when did you think you became a collector? Which obviously, there it is.
I think
3 watches in after that, you're like, oh, we got a problem because I still want more.
I think you do. I think when you're the real penny drop moment of being a collector with anything is when you, I every time I see something, I'm really fortunate to have been able to amass quite a few watches in the past few years. But I still say to myself, well, actually, you need to get that. You need you don't have that. You don't have, I don't know, a white dial chronograph. I mean, I do now, but these things, I don't. So at the moment, I'm going through this phase.
We always have the what's next.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of the hobby.
But when you start saying that to yourself regularly, that's when you're like, okay, this isn't I have friends that bought one watch. I've got a friend that bought Tudor, sort of an entry level Tudor, which is really nice, very chill, time only. And he's and that was 5 years ago, and he's never bought another watch. I, in a way, envy that because I'm not like that. So at the moment, I'm going through this phase of I don't have anything with a tritium dial, nothing. And I'm last night, I was thinking maybe I just buy CWC quartz. And they're pretty pretty affordable if you find one that's kind of a little bit beaten up.
Yeah, you shared one in the chat that was an actual military watch.
That's actually issued, and it makes it a little bit rarer.
That makes it cooler. Let's be honest. Like it was made for a job that it actually did. It's not just a aftermarket thought. It's an actual tool watch.
I do just find it crazily bizarre though that watch in particular was issued to a Royal Navy chap, and it's not, you can't even swim with it. I just find it hilarious. Like if the ship goes down, all the watches are ruined, aren't they? But sorry, getting back to what I was saying. Yeah, I'm obsessed with tritium at the moment. And I think when you say to yourself, "Oh, I really need something," I mean, we don't need more than one watch, do we? But when you say to yourself, do, that's when you know you've got a problem.
I kind of feel like I do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the moment for me when I realized that I was saying to myself, I need X, Y, Z.
So that leads to the how your tastes have changed. It sounds like you've gone from I want the prototypical Rolex Submariner to wanting more vintage as time's going on, wanting the tritium or something a little older.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I've learned, and it's the same with guitars, or people could draw parallels with cars or houses even. For me, it's actually the people, I think, in watches that has kind of risen to the top of my major enjoyment. And yeah, I guess from a design perspective, initially I was sort of like fell for the whole hype of what I perhaps should be liking. And bear in mind, I got into watches kind of just before the pandemic, but when I was really, really into watches, like when I first thought, okay, this is a thing, it was pandemic time. And that,
you're joined by a lot of people.
I mean, I was very lucky that I had started collecting before, so I was able to get my Submariner at a relatively accessible price.
Yeah.
But when I kind of felt, I think it was impossible to avoid the crazy sensationalism of watches skyrocketing in price. Everyone's speaking about, oh, blah, 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 this has just been dropped, like, by this company. This is cool. You should get that. You should get that. This is the hype watch, all that stuff, And I definitely was in that world for a while. But I think, to be honest, having people like Steve, father-in-law, around me that has from day one had like such a wide spectrum of brands that he's been into, everything from like Omega to Squale to like Christopher Ward to Halios to Arken now, all the Oris thing. Like, I was very lucky that, yes, whilst I did have that kind of hype thing going on, and I was just caught in that whole craziness, I still had someone on the outside being like, yeah, well, that's cool, but look at Studio Underdog, they're really cool.
So appreciation for the micro brands, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. But then, yeah, as time went on, again, I'm really into history. And actually, the first watch that I almost bought, which I kind of wish I had but didn't, was it was an Omega like Dirty Dozen original,
That's a cool one.
Yeah, and it was before. I mean, it was still a couple of grand. Obviously, that's money, but it was more accessible than maybe it would be now. And so I've always had this like bizarre fascination with, well, mainly wartime history, but actually anything with a story to it. And I think as time went on of me collecting watches, that kind of the heat of like hype that was around watches for me gradually subsided, and then was replaced by a fascination of the people behind the watches. And I love the thought of, I've been very fortunate to pick up a few quite interesting vintage, and I guess I'm also like interested when we can say vintage is now, because like, I got like a birth year date just, so it's like 30 years old, and it's like, it's not, I mean, that is vintage, right? And I think anything before 2000 now can probably count as vintage.
So I this is a struggling question of what is the vintage line, and my personal opinion is anything before 1997 or 1997 before, because that's the last year of tritium. So 1998 starts Luminova. So everything before that's going to have tritium. It's going to age like tritium. It's going to eventually look very vintage. And then modern watches to me start in 1998 with Luminova because they will age differently.
I like that. Okay, so with that in mind, then, so if I'm talking about, for example, my I've got like a 1969/70, it's a bit of a point of contention. Yeah, 36 mil day date linen Sigma dial, and what I love about that is the thought of who would have bought that in 1970 and how different they would have been probably to me, who is a tattooed, scruffy-haired musician. You know, and I took that watch.
They might have been a tattooed, scruffy-haired musician.
You never know. But I love the thought. Or for example, even more to the point, I've got a I think 1963 Seiko Matic, which was, as far as I'm aware, the first kind of automatic watch that Seiko made. And the one I've got in particular is slightly rarer. It's got a little bit, well, it's got more kind of water resistant. Not that you could swim with it, it'd probably break straight away, but you can get a bit more depth out of it. It's got a slightly more rare insignia on the back. It's like, I think it's a sea lion or something. I don't know. I can't remember. But I love the thought of, you know, someone in the early 60s in Japan, more like, well, it would have been Japan, probably like a business man has, or woman, you never know, bought this watch back then, all that time ago, and it's still on my wrist. And you know, I wore it last night to like a Christmas pub dinner, and I just love the thought of the watch going on this journey. And
interesting 6-decade journey.
Yeah, and people and you know, it really, I'm going through this period of like really thinking about mortality at the moment, which is weird. So all the songs I'm writing at the moment are about fragility of life and stuff, and
welcome to leaving your 20s.
Yeah, literally. But I like the thought of, you know, people really just being stepping stones for watches, and I love the thought that if you look after them, watches can last forever. Not to like, you know, not to sort of hit like
things that tell time. So thinking about time and mortality, kind of just part of what happens, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like I know like Patek at the moment and the marketing around everything Patek do seems to be a bit of a laughing episode, but I do kind of rate the original slogan where you sort of, you know, you never really own a Patek, you hold on to it for the next person. I don't own any Patek, but I like to think that my watches are like that. So that's been my biggest transition in collecting. I think it's gone from, oh, that's quite a cool watch, I want to buy that, whatever. Oh, and actually I'd rather someone not have owned it before me, to now I actively look for, well, obviously vintage, that has, you know, a little dink out of it, or if some of the loom plots are gone, or like, you know, it adds to it.
You like to see that's worn its history, that it's lived.
Absolutely. And then especially if you throw in something like, you know, it's Japanese, or if it's got like a different language, date or day, where, like, I just, so, you know, you picture where that watch would have been, you know, it was in Italy in 1973. Like, I love thinking about, it's almost like it's been catapulted from this, it's like a time capsule, right? And I love thinking about where that watch has been, and that's what I look for now in watches.
I completely get, I mean, I would love to have a date with a Basque language date wheel, which is an unusual thing that did exist, but because my wife's family is from the Basque region of Spain, it's just one of those that would be really cool to have. That's part of the family storyline, but that's a very hard thing to find. They did not make a whole lot of them because it's a very, very specific language for a small region. But I know Rolex did make it, so one day I'll hunt one down.
Yeah.
So speaking of collections, have you come across somebody, specifically, I'm sure your father-in-law, but anyone else that you see their collection, you're like, they get it. That's the kind of collection I would like to have.
It's hard because, you know, it would be easy to say, like, I saw, there's a chap who, I'm a big Universal Genève fan, and but I don't own any Universal Genève because it seems to be a bit of a minefield of trying to pick up something that's not been, you know, had the dial restored, but then something that doesn't look like it's been underground for like 50 years. So anyway, there's a chap that I saw do speaking about Universal Genève when, you know, Breitling just announced that they were doing it again, and he had loads of really nice Universal Genèves. So like I appreciate things like that, but actually what I'd love to sort of say I'm a believer of is I don't really look at other people's collections and idolize having their collections, because for me now, definitely, watch collecting is so personal. So I really want to get to a point, or aspire to be the sort of person that can, without being influenced by anyone other than how I feel, can go to an antique shop or even like a, you know, like something modern and say, do I like that? Yes, I really do. I will buy that, irrespective of whether the WhatsApp group's gonna cancel me. You know, so I mean, look, I can say obvious things like we all probably want John Mayer's collection, right? That's a given. But actually,
I mean, to be perfectly honest, if I had his collection, I'd probably sell 95% of it because it's not my taste.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, well, and that probably then is to my point even more. Like, yes, there's people I see and I'm like, oh, I love that particular Patek you've got, or that Eric Clapton tri-compacts, really cool. Yeah. But actually, my collection is so personal to me that I try and not copy things. And then again, that's
a great answer. That's a good way to do it.
Thank you. I do like what's he called? I've just completely forgotten his name. There's a guy that I've been he's like he had loads of modern Rolex and sold them all. He is. His P&L watch collection on Instagram. I can't remember his name. I've been speaking to him as well, and I can't remember his name. But basically, he had loads of modern stuff, like a full modern collection, mainly kind of sports Rolex, and he sold it all and just completely replaced it for vintage. So I'll show you on the screen if you can see this, but like this is what he's got at the moment. So, you know,
so it's got for vintage Rolex mostly.
Everything. He's got a couple of other brands, but mainly kind of Rolex. But you know, stuff like he's got two of my favorite vintage Rolexes in this collection. My all-time grail is 1655. Like that's the epitome of what I want to hopefully own. But then he's also got this
Explorer 2.
Yes, kind of the first late 60s, early 70s.
I'm horrible at reference numbers.
Okay, so it's this.
Rolex reference numbers, especially. Yeah.
It's called the Steve McQueen. Even though Steve McQueen never wore one, as far as we're aware.
I love how everything in a Rolex needs to have a nickname, whether it's right or not.
But absolutely. I would say him though. If there was someone that, and it's funny because I'm not a massive. I don't really care about Rolex that much, but I think him. If there was someone I look at and I think actually what it is mainly about him that I love is his willingness to be like, to reevaluate his point in collecting and being like, okay, I've been collecting this now. Is this how I truly feel about watches? How have
my tastes changed over time?
And then committing to the change.
That's impressive because I have a hard time selling anything. So I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, this year was the first year I sold anything. And it was weird, but I'm glad I did it.
I mean, you did your collection review a few weeks ago. Which is interesting to see because I know, especially like the pink Tudor you had and then sold and went through a few things, but it's a nice collection now, I think.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
A couple of Orises. I had to love the Oris sweater in the video.
Yeah, it's funny that that video. I think a lot of people thought that it's really hard because you don't want to look like pretentious and showy, but like that video is actually just what I've picked up this year. It's not like a full collection video. So I've had a lot of people that have like messaged me separately being like, oh my God, you've sold your Bel Canto, or like, what about your birth year date? Just like, where are all these? And I'm like
no, you have a 1-of-1 Bel Canto that they made for you.
Yeah. You imagine I sold that as well.
Which is, I mean, I wish that, it wasn't a 1-of-1 and was a collection because it's kind of the thing I would like to own too.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's a beautiful choice. I love the guitar feel of that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, so fortunate to work with them on that. And you know, Mike and Patrick in particular at Christopher Ward are just lovely chaps. And what I like, you know, sort of touching back on what I said earlier, when I first got into watches, it was quite a scary environment to try and make headway in. I didn't, you know, because I didn't feel, I think, you know, it's very easy for people to look at people from different industries trying to come into the watch world and be like, oh, they don't really like watches. You know, you look at some of these catwalks, these like gala events, and people are walking down and they've all obviously been given watches, and people are, oh, they don't even care what, blah, blah, blah. But what was really nice for me is, well, a few individuals. So primarily Andrew Morgan was so welcoming to me, and he's one of my best mates now. And he kind of helped introduce me to Christopher Ward, and Christopher Ward was so open to just like meeting me and talking to me and stuff. So I think that's why that watch in particular and Christopher Ward are always going to be a special place in my heart. I mean, you know, also being like a British company, I think that's amazing. I think they're doing it in such a good way with their, well, to be honest, like transparency with the costs of things, never charging people more than 3 times like what it costs to make. Like, I love that. That's everything that I love in a brand.
They've also been very good with community. We've had them here in Atlanta. We've had we've done different things with them. They've been fortunate. They've been nice enough to send some watches for reviews, because we've done Bel Canto and the Trident GMT. They're very good with reaching out and being part of the community. So kudos to any watch brand that does that, but Christopher Ward has certainly been one of the best. And Peter and Mike Pearson and Peter France, those are the two that you dealt with, because those are the ones that I know from Christopher Ward that they're always reaching out. Or are you talking about Mike France?
Yes. Yeah, so Mike France, but also Mike Pearson, and then there's Patrick Gilbert as well. Is it Gilbert or Gilbert? Okay. Gilbert. But I mean, basically everyone there, and actually but genuinely, and I think that's nice, because what I like about Christopher Ward is, you know, I was very fortunate to be invited to. They did like it was like a 10-year, no, it must have been 20-year, like a birthday party boat thing on the Thames in the summer. And they had like effectively every member of staff that worked there, and like the designer that kind of helped do my watch I'd never met before sort of came up to me and was just really nice young guy. And I like that the brand, there's no kind of, doesn't feel like there's any stuffiness or kind of they're not aloof or put themselves on a pedestal. They're just like normal people that are really nice and actually into watches. You know, they're not afraid to include other watch brands in their like monthly magazine that you know you can get sent round. And I like that, you know, Mike will speak about, I think I saw Mike speaking about IWC the other day, and it's just like, I quite like them for that, where they're not like, you know, they're just open.
You're only allowed one watch brand, and you know, that kind
and
of
it's just like
process.
that. And look, the reality is that is not how it works in our community. I don't know a single person that only collects one brand. Like, you know, obviously there's some crazy Patek or AP collectors, but like, you know,
we have some crazy Longa and AP collectors in the group.
Longa in particular, but
there's one extreme Longa collector, and then there's a few AP collectors.
But you know, but what I mean though is, like, I think if you're looking across the board, 99% of people in the watch community are not one watch people. And I think brands doing events and things, and it's almost like it's cardinal sin to even like allude to another brand or another model. I get it from the marketing perspective, but I just don't think that's how it is in our community. We like talking about other brands, and talking about other brands is not putting down, you know, certain brands. It's just, I just think like Christopher Ward feel like, to me, they're part of, you know, the British Watchmakers Society and stuff, and I like that we're part of a team. I think we need to start seeing ourselves as being kind of on the same side instead of trying to put other people out of business, because we don't want to, you know, we want more people into watches, not less.
Yeah, and I will say it's the Bel Canto, especially for Christopher Ward, put them on the map, because anytime you can bring something that new and that affordable price point. I mean, I say affordable, but this is the world of watches. Something's $4,500, and that's affordable.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
That's like, for a striking watch, it is, but that's the crazy. It's hard to relate that sometimes. I will say, like, do you have it? Do you feel out of place when you start talking about watches because of the cost of them? Like, there's no way to get in the watches and only spend a few $100s.
It's a really interesting one that I struggle with a little bit, because, like, if you think about, I just try and think about if I wasn't into watches and it was something else. Say, for example, it's like, I don't know. Say it was like cars. Like, I like cars, but just spending.
It's cheaper than cars.
Well, it's cheaper than cars, but like, it just, if you, okay, maybe a good way of comparing it for me and my friends. It's like, people go on holidays of a lifetime, or me growing up at home, if say $4,000 or $5,000 for me then, I mean, even still now, like, that would have been, I'd never left Europe until I started the Vamps. So, like, for me, having £3,000-4,000 or dollars to spend on, like, travel is something, it was incomprehensible. We never did it. So, like, and now I'm just like, oh, well, as you say, the Bel Canto, and I actually think value for money is brilliant. It's great, but even spending £500 on something, it's kind of wild. So, and I am very conscious of that, especially when, I love being part of the watch community. I want to carry on doing that. I see my future there, hopefully, but I'm also conscious that it's a bloody expensive time to be alive at the moment, no matter where you live. And and a lot of people that follow my music are, younger people that are struggling to pay rent in many ways. And then I'm speaking about, like a vintage Rolex that, in theory, well, not in theory, in reality, I don't need. So yes, I think it is a bit of a weird one, and I am conscious of that. It's a funny one.
But at the same time, if you can, you should be able to do what you love.
And I also think it is important to say that I'm not someone that has ever spent excessive amounts of money on clothes. I don't, I've never gone out, like, in the whole, like, London nightlife scene. I've never spent loads of money on, like, a booze in a club. It's not me.
Rock star life.
No, I really didn't. I've been very, very conscious of that for years. And, like, the one thing that I've spent money on is, I've never bought, like, pieces of art. Like, I've never done that. So I think for me, watches is the one thing that I've spent money on. But even with that said, I'm trying my best at the moment, and part of the reason that I'm trying to hold off buying a watch until we go to Japan next year is because I'm really conscious that my wife in particular, for her, the best thing in the world to do is kind of travel, experience different cultures, learn, meet people. And so if you're looking at, like, pound for happiness return, me spending a couple £1,000s on a trip to Japan instead of getting a watch is probably what I should be spending money on. But what I'm not saying is I'm actually going to buy a couple of watches in Japan, but she doesn't need to know that.
Well, you buy some watches in Japan because it reminds you of the trip forever.
Yeah, true, true.
It's something that can last forever to say, like, hey, we got this when we did this great trip together. I think that's kind of the cool thing, is when you can do that, is because a lot of us buy watches to mark an event. It's certainly how most of us got into something was, hey, I got this first great job. I got this first big paycheck. I got the birth of my child, the marriage, like, that's usually how we first got a watch. Why not? We're on vacation in Japan. Let's get a Seiko or a Grand Seiko.
Yeah.
Find a vintage Tudor, which are not expensive, the vintage ones.
No. And that, well, in fact, I mean, look, across the board, watches are very, very cheap in comparison to the rest of the world. With the yen being so poor, it's actually wild. Like, I was looking at some vintage Tudor subs the other day, and obviously you never want to look for the absolute cheapest ones because there's probably something worrying about them. But but it is sometimes nice to just do that flick on Chrono 24 and be like lowest first, and I think about £2,000
for Crown and Caliber and Hodinkee. Most of my buying was from Japan.
Yeah.
I would go and spend $1 million buying watches in Japan. And just have them shipped over because it was the best deal. So I'd oftentimes they're actually the best condition.
Yes.
Like they really
definitely
take good care of everything, are very honest about the condition. I've never had a problem. Very rare to have any kind of problem. And we'd buy a lot of watches. Lot. I would spend a few million a month buying watches from Japan.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
so that's a fun thing to do with somebody else's money.
Yeah, that is true. I think obviously sometimes they're not scared to polish things, but what I would say is they'll say, oh, this Speedmaster's condition is like good, and we're like, it's immaculate. So I mean, they do look
one scratch on the underside of a lug.
Yeah. So I think I love the fact that they look after them whilst the end's poor. It's going to be a good time to get stuff. But I'm even looking at sort of like vintage Breguet at the moment. There's a couple of and also vintage Blancpain. There's a few precious metal, relatively complicated pieces. And there was something for it's like $4,000, and it's like a moon phase. I think it was day and date as well. Like, precious metal. Yeah, maybe 35 mil, so not for everyone, but I've got really small wrists. And, for a bit grand.
Is a killer. Just killer. How good they are, especially if you get the Daniel Roth era from the mid to early 90s. Those are some of the best made Breguets in modern times, period. Those are the fantastic ones, but they're smaller. They're 36 or 34 millimeters.
Yeah,
but if you like that,
I'm into that, and I think they're still obviously in our world, people appreciate them, but even still, they're for what you're getting money wise. It is again, it's all relative because it's money, but it's actually crazy the watchmaking you're getting for that money, especially in Japan.
Yeah. So I want to kind of end the interview as we get along here with what we call the watch questionnaire.
Okay.
Which is based on the Proust questionnaire, if you're a literary nerd, meant to get to the heart of who you are as a watch collector. So these are meant to be rapid fire, top of your head. No long, just quick, what you think, or what's the first thing to happen. So let's start.
Yeah.
What was your very first watch?
Rolex Submariner.
So that's also your first luxury watch. It's a good way to start. Favorite watch complication?
GMT.
For the traveling?
Yes.
Or just aesthetic?
Travel.
Biggest watch regret?
There's not meant to be a pause here, is there? A biggest watch regret is not a big deal, but it's not buying a tritium dial Speedmaster and getting a more modern one.
Fair enough. Advice you'd give to a new watch collector?
Buy what you like, not what you feel you should like.
Fair enough. Date window, yes or no?
Are we saying Cyclops or just any date window?
Any date window.
I'm all for date. I actually use that a lot. So yes, date window.
Date window at 4:30, yes or no?
Yes, I don't mind.
No problem.
Yeah.
Favorite type of watch strap?
Oh, that's really hard. I'd say NATO, really.
Fair enough. Are watches jewelry?
They can be. No
problem.
I not for me. I do use it as a tool. But then you say when I'm wearing my diamond indice date just, I mean, it's not really a tool, is it?
The diamond encrusted red Oris.
I'm diving with that. Yeah.
I love that idea. I love
the bezel that doesn't move as well, obviously. Like,
it's a funny question. That one really divides people. It's like,
yes.
Favorite material for a watch case?
Oh, that's hard. I think I'm gonna say for a case, probably steel, but I love titanium from my Shumbun. It's great, so I'm gonna say steel and be boring.
Fair enough. Thoughts on watch meetups?
Great, as long as they are welcoming to new people.
And if they're not, they need to just fly a kite.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. Micro brands.
What, yes or no?
Just their general first thoughts of it.
Love them. I think the market's quite flooded, so I'm really interested in brands like Studio Underdog, or I would say even like Brew, or people that are doing things that are more innovative. I don't really want to see just like another bog standard dive watch micro brand, to be completely honest.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I will. Yeah. 90% of micro brands I feel are missing the point and not bringing anything new to the table. Yeah. Studio Underdog, Brew, those are good ones. Ming has been a good one.
Yes. Yeah.
We've been friendly with them here in Atlanta, so
they're really cool, actually. Yes, I do. I've obviously seen pictures. I've never been hands on with one, but they are great.
Well, we need to get you here in the States at some point. We'll get you a feel on your wrist.
Yeah.
All right. Brand word association.
Yeah.
Rolex.
Banker.
Omega.
I'm trying to be nice. I like Omega. I think it is a bit nerdy, but then also at the same time, I hate that I'm saying this. I just think actor at the moment.
That's funny. Hamilton.
I just think America. I don't know why. It's just America.
It's an American brand.
I know, but I just think there's something about that brand where I'm like, the person is American wearing one.
Vacheron Constantin.
It's funny this. So I know you want quick answers, but I found out the other day that Vacheron and Patek, and I think there's another one, they base their logos off old crusading orders of knights. Right. So like, Knights Templar and all that stuff, that's where apparently it originated, their logo. So I now think every time of a Vacheron, I think of like the Crusades, which is not great. So I'm going to change it and I think like Swiss après ski with cheese fondue and like very posh, and everyone's wearing like turtleneck things, and I don't know why, because I really like Vacheron, but that's just what I feel like.
Honestly, that sounds like
Swiss.
A good evening.
Yeah.
I'll take some fondue and a Vacheron. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Christopher Ward.
Saying accessible makes it seem like I'm degrading the brand. I don't mean it like that. I think accessible, but in a good way, which is a bit of a rubbish answer. No, I'm going to change that. I'm going to say innovative. Right. Innovative, because, the 12, that Moonface, the Bel Canto, I think innovation is something that they are actively trying to pursue, which I really value.
Richard Mille.
Yuck.
Zenith.
The first word I think with that is vintage, but what I mean is they have so much to offer if you just look back 10, 20 years. I also, at the same time as saying that, would say I'm worried for Zenith, because there's just too much. I think as a customer, like a user experience on their website, there's too much, and there's a disconnect between their different lines, I would personally say. But again, that El Primero Chronomaster that I've got at the moment in steel, and also the yellow gold option is, I think for the money, for the feeling, I don't know what would beat that for me at the moment. So, yeah.
That was a long one-word answer.
Sorry.
It's all right. Last one, Universal Jeanette.
I'm going to... You want one word. If you'd asked me this question 3 months ago, I would say like just... there's something like romantic about that brand and the history. Now, I would say concern, but in a weird way, because I love the fact Breitling are hopefully bringing them back. Obviously, Breitling make amazing chronographs. And so that, you know, Tricompax is my favorite Universal Genève line. So I think there's some real hopeful optimism there. But my concern is if they price those, you know, the pole router, I heard a rumor, which is probably a load of rubbish, that it was going to cost a lot of money.
That's been the rumor.
Yes, I heard sort of north of £15,000, which is crazy. So that's my concern. Universal Genève is probably my favorite brand, so I'm terrified that it will become inaccessible with their new models, and then consequently push up the vintage to an even greater premium than it is already, and just make that brand completely inaccessible to everyone. Yes, that's probably what I'd say.
Cautiously optimistic. How about that?
Yeah, but yes, but well,
go with that.
no, I actually, I would say desperately optimistic, because I worry that I'm not going to feel good about what's going to happen.
Fair enough. All right, switch it up a little bit. Watch brand doing it right.
I think that, I mean, Christopher Ward sounds like I'm just like a massive. I am a big fanboy.
There's no problem with that.
I think doing it right from the perspective of that transparency is really, really good. What else can I say? I mean, Chris Ward's probably the big one. I also,
there's no wrong answer.
I'll stick with that. I'll stick with that.
All right. Best kind of watch collector.
I think someone that's welcoming, because one thing that really, really frustrates me is almost like if you could compare some watch collectors to like golf, and it's like you go to some golf clubs and the people don't want you to be there, they hate you, and completely like closed books. And I find that trait for any person, I think, is just really off-putting and annoying. So I think that the worst type of watch collector are the people that are just like set in their ways and not willing to change.
So that goes the best kind and the worst kind right there.
Yeah.
Favorite style of watch?
That's impossible. I would say vintage complication. So yeah, like a Tricompax, really. I think from a design perspective, precious metal,
phase, date, chronographs.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, I'd say
that's one of my. I'm gonna get off on a tangent from here. The little things that drive me nuts is that when people say Tricompax and they mean only a 3-register chronograph, because that's not.
No.
Tricompax means 3 complications.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think the moon phase. Look, I really like the the Unicompax as well. Is that what it's called? I like.
That's the chronograph.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, really cool. I love that. But just having that moon phase is just something
completely
about
agree.
it. Yeah.
Drink of choice.
Ooh. I mean, I had to. I stopped drinking whiskey for a long time after a pretty heavy evening on some. I brought some bourbon back from Nashville and regretted I had half the bottle one Easter Sunday and couldn't drink anything like that. Yeah. So I didn't do that for a long time, but I'm really back into, mainly Japanese whiskey actually now. But if not, then red wine, I'd say.
Not wrong with that. Favorite musician growing up?
There's an Irish folk singer-songwriter called Damien Rice, who is probably the biggest inspiration of all time for me.
And word association for I'm a celebrity, get me out of here.
Hunger. And boredom. No, boredom. Boredom.
Just sitting around all day waiting.
Yeah.
And finally, what is your Grail watch?
The Grail watch, it's got to be a 1655. It just has to be. Early 70s. And actually, you know what? I'm not fussed if some of the numbers on the bezel have scratched away. I don't mind if the orange GMT hands even completely faded altogether. There's just something about that watch that has always been alluring to me, which is funny because, when you asked me before my favorite kind of watch, it would be like a tri-compact. But for some reason,
You've also said GMT is your favorite too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So obviously I've got that there, but I think I don't know what it is. I think maybe I watched like a Teddy Balthazar video or something years ago, and he was speaking about the more modern Explorer 2s. And then I just went down a rabbit hole, and for some reason, you know, I love, you know, I don't even really care about other vintage Rolex. It's just something about the 1655. It's just, I don't know what it is. And you know what? That's what I love about watches.
But we get, as collectors, we just find that one that's like, man, I can't get that out of my head ever. And that's the one. And that's fantastic. That's the one where you can't wait. And once you have it, you love it. But eventually something else creeps in your head like, oh, I also want that one day.
Yes, exactly.
But you also appreciate the one you have.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, the biggest frustration I have with watch collecting is, you know, that often the chase supersedes the actual acquisition. And I have to say, I've been very fortunate to have a few 1655s like in my hand, on my wrist, and I still love it. And you know, there's been some things over the years that I've really thought I'd loved, had, or borrowed off friends, and then been like, you know what, it's not for me. But yeah, the 1655 is kind of the only thing that has remained on kind of top of my list since day one.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, with that, we'll end the interview and say thank you, James, for joining us. It's been great to actually talk with you face to face after years of talking on social media. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much, dude.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Man.